Welcome, fans, to another live edition of the Cheap Heat Productions Pro Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling, and we have a return guest tonight, a man who I'm having the pleasure of having the first interview with, but a man who had a really significant run during what I regard as the greatest period of professional wrestling in the United States. He worked for Jim Crockett Promotions, NWA, WCW, WWF, Puerto Rico, and several other stops in between. We're pleased to have Mr. Chuck Coates back on the program. But before we get to Chuck, as per the tradition, I'd like to welcome and introduce Mr. Cheap Heat himself, the tireless civil servant, man of the people, Mr. Morris Shortall.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Jack. A lot has changed since we last talked, Chuck. I got elected over here in Ireland, and I'm part of the Kilkenny County Council now. So, my free time is slipping by my fingers. So this is our first show in 5 weeks. So I'm happy to be back and happy to have you on again, Chuck.
Yes, glad to be here. It's been an exciting opportunity to be able to share with you some stories.
Well, Chuck, before we get into the details of your career, I find that the fans appreciate some baseline information and starting logically with whether you were a fan of the business growing up, and if so, did you follow any particular organizations, companies during the territory era?
Yeah, I was, my dad was a big fan, and here in North Carolina and USA, we got wrestling came on at 11:30 on out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and he would stay up and watch it, and it was kind of like a reward for me on the weekends. If I did good in school, I could stay up and watch it with him. But my first memory, I was probably seven or 8 years old, and I remember the Mighty Igor, Bulldog Bob Brower, Johnny Powers, Eric the Red. So that was the IWA. That was my very first introduction to pro wrestling, and big Mighty Igor fan. Being a 7-year-old kid, you bring a puppy to the ring, and man, I was hooked already. And so that was my first really as a child experience. And Dad watched it, and then the Mid Atlantic. As I got older, the Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling here in the States in the Southeast was a big thing when late 70s, early 80s, and so. That's where you saw your Ricky Steamboats and Mr. Wrestling, Tim Woods, Mr. Wrestling #2, Black Jack Mulligan, Paul Jones, of course, Ric Flair, Ray Stevens, Greg Valentine, Jimmy Snuka. They all, were in that area and during that time. And I just by that time, I was hook, line, and sinker. If they ever came around the area, I was going to get a ticket. Back then, if I'm not mistaken, general admission tickets for $5. Ringside was $10 or $8 or $10. So, and you couldn't beat it. We didn't realize how good we had it back then. And so very rarely did I miss a live show here within 30 miles of my house. So those were the good old days. And I that's when I started watching, when I really got into it.
Was there a particular moment when you decided I want to pursue this as a career? And second part of that question, can you talk about how you landed on a trainer and school and per se, and what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, I when I was middle school, I'd say 13 years old, I would always impersonate Ric Flair. He was my big hero. I went from Mighty Igor to Ric Flair, and you didn't really. A lot of people didn't like the heels back in the day when we actually could distinguish obviously good and bad, but for some reason. Like a lot of people say, his style, and I was going against the grain. I've always kind of, liked things people didn't like, and so I was a Horseman guy and Ric Flair guy, and I mean, I hate to get ahead of myself, but just this past weekend, I got to see Ric Flair and Greg Valentine have a conversation. I immediately took a picture. Rick shared it today on his social media of him and Greg back in the 70s and him and Greg this past weekend. And that was cool. I took that picture, but I took it for me. Of course, I don't mind him sharing, but I just instantly went back to the 70s whenever they were tag team champions, and it was just awesome. But I decided that young in my teens that I was gonna look into maybe um, doing this for a career. You know, everybody starts out when you go to wrestling school. Your dream is to be Hulk Hogan, Undertaker, Ric Flair, Harley Race, all the guys. You know, but sometimes it's not in the cards. But you know, people say, "Well, you almost made it." Well, I did make it. I just didn't, start. So, uh, with that being said, I'd go to the matches and I would pick everybody's brain I could. Klondike Bill would put up the rings. We would stay after or get there early and talk to him. And Tommy Young, the referee, he would hang out. He was a um, uh, good person to talk to. He didn't mind, you didn't want to bother the boys because they were all business, but promoters in the area. And so we were very, very straightforward. And we didn't, we were the kind, and I say a good friend of mine I met in college, we just decided to grab the bull by the horns and get all the information we could. So as I got older, I remember going around high school, middle school, and doing my wrestling, and people were like, "You're going to do that, aren't you?" I said, "I am." And some people thought I was crazy, but you know, it just was something in my blood. I mean, everybody has a dream. Some kids want to play basketball or be astronauts, doctors, firemen. So many dreams. I wanted to be a pro wrestler, and the older I got, the more the real it came to me because I was able to join a wrestling school and be professionally trained. And man, it was ready. I was ready to go at 19 years old. So, what a memory that was.
What training school did you go to, Chuck?
We went to Nelson Royal and Gene Nelson. If you remember right, the latter part of the Crockett years, the Ricky Nelsons, Tommy Angels, David Isleys, George Souths, they all were the enhancement guys for Crockett. And we would, Tommy was a great guy. David Isley was a great guy. And they would actually talk to you and give you information. So I would say once again, staying afterwards and wait for the guys to get dressed and leave. And they would give us advice. Tommy said, "Well, Nelson Royal's got a great school in Charlotte. Yeah, I'm going to tell you, it's not easy." And so we, took all the advice we could and drove down there. Once again, I say we because my best friend, Mike Howell, he ended up getting a contract later on. But we started together and we met in college, and it was all full steam ahead. And so 1987, we took off and went down to Nelson School and got trained. We wrestled before that, but we really didn't. It was more like backyard stuff, and I wouldn't even consider it. We would just like most kids do. You see what you see on television, and you go out there and do it. I didn't know left side from right side, and I didn't know, the safety measures you need to take when you're doing suplexes and tuck your head and the bumps. We did them. It kind of came natural to me, but really got serious about it when I was 19 years old, and that's when I went and met Nelson and Gene and was trained the right way. So that's how it all began.
I've got something quick there. You mentioned Mike Howell. He's a good friend of yours. I've asked him numerous times to come on the show. Is there any way you could twist his arm for him to come on and have a chat with us?
I probably could. He's got a lot of stories, and he's I'll do my best. I will promise you I will contact him tomorrow and we can get him on.
Yeah, we'll get back to that at another point. I just want to talk now without getting into politics, but obviously with everything that's went on in America the last few weeks, when you had stuff like The Undertaker and Kane endorsing Trump, and then you had Batista, the Biden with his association with Biden and everything, it's like it brings it back. Like wrestling is still a massive, massive thing, isn't it, over there? And did that kind of thing divide people within the wrestling business? I know you hang around with a few guys, or did it kind of make it easier for them to talk about politics? Just trying to understand it from a small country like Ireland, to see two guys that are trying to take the American president job. Obviously, Kamala, not a guy, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How big it is, like wrestling, and like just the whole, it's just madness from over here looking at wrestlers being endorsed by presidents and stuff like that. Yeah. What's all that like?
A lot of times it's surprising because somebody like Undertaker, Kane, somebody like Hulk Hogan recently, usually you keep let's face it. At the end of the day, it's all about money. Whenever it comes to the wrestlers, and if you offend one of the other sides, you might cost yourself some cash. I mean, because people will turn you off in a heartbeat over here over a politician. And I was very surprised Hogan came out, and Undertaker, and I knew Glenn was going to do it because he's already a very, very big conservative mayor in County, Tennessee. So I I knew where he lay. And plus, we've talked before about it. And but seeing the big dogs come out and really voice their opinions, I don't think that happens in 2016. But now that it's been so many years later, people are not as afraid anymore to share what their beliefs. And you hope it doesn't get ugly. But this seems like a different tone over here this time with him winning. And I think people are more bold, and they're going to say what they want to say. And the first time around, you kind of keep quiet and here and there, but mostly Hollywood actors were voicing their opinion. But this time around, people are coming out it blew my mind. Some of the people that just this past weekend, I mean, I got in a conversation with Ron Simmons. He brought it up and he said some things, and I was like, wow, you can't assume nothing. And he says he voted for what was best for his family and what was best for him. And so he didn't ever say who he voted for, but I think I knew where he was going. But, it's just, and everybody's got a different feeling about it. But it is kind of, it is a little bit surprising to me that some of the big dogs like Hogan and Taker and and like I said, Glenn's kind of different because he made he's
in that statement
years ago. But and now that it's happened, there was no issues. I mean, people are going to be they're going to feel the way they feel, and if you take it personal, then I try my best personally not to judge somebody by their political belief. That's what America is.
Yes.
Right to believe the way you wish, and it's sad that it gets ugly sometimes, but it's done, it's over, and I am so glad the mudslinging's gone, the commercials are gone, the text messages, but now it's what they said is what they said, and they're labeled now. So I'll share something with you. Kind of, I don't know, Danhausen I met him briefly about 2 years ago, and the guy that was with me, Tony, the guy I work for at these conventions, he said, "You're a huge Kane fan, aren't you?" He said, "I used to be." He said, "He runs his mouth too much." So right then we shut it down. I'm like, I know what he's getting at, because Kane being a very big conservative, obviously he wasn't. So it changes people's feeling. Being a huge fan of Undertaker or Kane and a political opinion, just people shut it out. I'm not saying he's right or wrong. That's his personal business. But, it's just surprising that I guess what it was is people just aren't as afraid to share anymore about how they feel. If you're red, you're blue, whatever you are. And so that's really the way I feel about it. But like when Hogan came out on national TV and ripped his shirt off and did his thing, I was like, wow, he's, something, I'm not going to say triggered, but something got him to the point where he had enough. And so maybe it was the assassination attempt, I guess, but because he made mention of that. But it is some of our biggest stars in the business have come out politically, and voice their opinions. And that's their right. But doing it on national stage is kind of surprising to me. If I do it, it's not a big deal because I'm Chuck Coates. But if you're known all over the world, that's my take on it. They're just more.
But Chuck, you have to remember he's a WWE Hall of Famer as well.
That has a lot to do with the rest. The wrestling part it puts him over, right? But I think, if I'm not mistaken, Linda McMahon's isn't she in politics?
Yeah, she's got a big role, I think, with this new regime. So
so she'll be right there, and I think I've seen her a couple of times on some of his campaign speeches. She's been like, you can see her in the background. I think it looks like Linda McMahon, but it was her. But anyway, I don't think Vince said much. I'm talking years ago. Now it's different, but truth be known, I just, like I said, overall, I'm pretty surprised that people have come out like they have. And like I said, no matter which side, Batista, Undertaker. But the fact is, I guess, like I said, Hollywood actors don't mind saying you got De Niro and you got some of those guys, Jack Black, they've been saying what they feel for years, Rosie. So now I guess wrestlers, more or less the wrestlers are coming out and doing the same thing. It's really no different.
Yep.
One last thing before we leave politics.
Please.
We're talking about the we're talking about the right to express whatever opinion you're on, but I know you're familiar, and I was going to ask you a question about this anyway, so it kind of dovetails. But you're no doubt familiar with Jim Cornette,
Yes.
who has a very successful podcast, and in my opinion and others, it's fine to express what side you're on, but he has gone completely overboard with the vitriol one way or another, and I've stopped listening to his content, as I'm sure other people have, because of that particular situation. Where do you think the line needs to be drawn in that respect? And do you have any Jim Cornette recollections from whatever time frame to share?
Jim makes it personal, and that's what really, to me, that's over the line. Now, I got to admit, President Trump makes it personal too. So, in all fairness, he says some things that I probably wouldn't say. He doesn't mind to tell you what he thinks, but so it's kind of the same thing. But Jimmy, he seems to get fired up, and he gets on and on and goes on, and it doesn't take much to get him, excited in a negative way, if you will. And I mean, this is a personal feeling. I can't handle all the cursing and such. That's just me. And I'm not saying, it's whatever he does. I'd love to listen to it. I just can't handle the GDs and all. And that's nothing to do with politics. That's just him. But the fact that he just lays it out there, and, I don't know. It's just, there's a line there. You can voice your opinion and say what you got to say, but sometimes it gets to the point where I think it's a little too much, and he does go overboard at times. And I agree with you. I can't listen to it because of that. I would feel the same way if it was the other way. If somebody was just letting Harris have it, or Walz, or whoever. And sometimes I tune people out on the right. I'm like, man, dude, I'm thinking to myself, that's a human being, regardless of how they feel. And when you talk about wishing death on people, I'm not saying Jimmy does that, but people just get so it just shows you what they really are thinking. And it's like, regardless, we're all humans. We're all in this life we live. And I mean, look at Joe Biden now, bless his heart. He's out there shaking hands and inviting him to the White House, and who knows what they talked about. They don't know. They don't have much, of what went on. I know they had that photo, but Joe actually looks at peace. I'm like, wow, all these years of talking back and forth, and here they are sitting there shaking hands, and who knows what they're talking about. He did.
We have to park this and get back to wrestling. He did call him a Nazi, and then a few weeks later, he's shaking his hand. But anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, right. And then I guess we're pieces of garbage. But anyway,
do you have any Jim Cornette stories, Chuck?
I met Jim. First time I ever met him was in 1988 at Dorton Arena in Raleigh. It was a house show for Jim Crockett Promotions. I was a fan, bought a ticket, hadn't started my training yet, and got a picture with him and Bobby Eaton. I was really surprised because I'd heard that he was big on kayfabe, which they all were, but he agreed to take the photo, and I'm like, wow. And I've got it upstairs. They said it's Tennis Racket and Bobby's. It was after the show, and they decided that they agreed to take a picture with me, and kind of blew my mind. I thought, wow, I'd expected totally different. Having a little Kodak disc camera, back in the day, way before cell phones. And that was neat. So that's the first time I ever met him. I saw him during the WCW time with me. He was doing some commentary, and he was, I think that was after he was managing. Trying to remember. Maybe Bobby was still, and Stan. Bobby had kind of went to singles. Remember that?
Yes. You worked him, correct?
Yeah,
on TV.
4 different times. And I'm counting in 5 different times. I had 2 on the indie circuit. He tagged with Ricky Nelson, and I tagged with Ricky Morton. So we were kind of doing a rock and roll midnight. Of course, we were the fill-ins because Robert and Stan weren't available. I don't think Stan was doing anything at the time, but I saw him backstage a few times, and we speak. He probably wouldn't remember him if he saw me today, but there's not really a lot of memories there because the only times it was in passing when I talked to him, and short and sweet. How you doing? Good to see you. Whatever. but we never really got to know each other.
We didn't talk so much about this last time, but the reason why you left in 2002, like I seen some news articles that were across the webpage that you had some health issues. Did that ultimately make you decide to step away from the business, or if you want to talk about that, if you want?
Sure. I stepped away for good in 2006. I did. Up until then, I was doing independence. Remember when the NWA Jim Crockett sold to TBS Turner, and the NWA kind of deflated. But we're still the NWA, and they still had territories. It just we didn't get the TV exposure. Well, Turner took off with WCW, and we were still working for NWA out of Charlotte, and I was doing that, and I was doing a character called Mad Max. But Bobby Fulton gave me that the paint, the Sting look with the Raven type dress, and Bobby Fulton from the Fantastics. I was working for him regularly. He was running Big Time Wrestling, and he came up to me. I was his Russian assassin back right off of the Jim Crockett days with Jack Victory and Angel of Death. They ran with it when it was over with. I did a great Russian, and so the Nikita Koloff and everything, the voice, and Bobby says I gotta have you as my Russian. So I did that. But one day he come to me and said, I want to try this with you, and it was the character Mad Max, and it the paint was over because Sting was hot, and I had a look about me that kind of was appealing. So I was supposed to be a heel, and people would cheer. They, like I said, they were trying to. I can't tell you how many times. Are you related to Sting? You look like maybe y'all are cousins or brothers or whatever. And I wasn't going for that. I was going for this madman out of the asylum, almost like Sid Vicious, and it didn't work. The paint I had a flat top and everything. And so Bobby said, well, let's run with it. Just turn your baby face. And we did that. So anyways, I was doing all that and going on. And I had pretty much, I hadn't been doing TVs in a while, to get to your point. And I was doing indie shows. And in 2006, I was scheduled to wrestle in Virginia. And Lex Luger was, speaking of Lex Luger, hey, like my hat? He gave me that Saturday. Lex,
nice.
Yeah, man, cool, huh? Had to wear that. And we were scheduled to wrestle in a fair show, and I had to get over here. You have to have a license by the commission, and you have to get it every year. Well, my license had ran out, and so I went and got a physical, and doctor says, okay, everything looks good, but I want you to get a place in my neck. I had something going on there, no symptoms or anything. And so I went and got checked. They biopsied it, and they ended up saying, we're going to have to do surgery. We don't have any conclusive. I said, what's going on? They wouldn't tell me. Long story short, I had a diagnosis with lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. Lymphoma and leukemia are very similar. And so I went ahead and did the match, and I finished up, but that was my last official match because I decided to focus on getting well. So I would say I hung up the boots in 2006. I've done 2 charities since then, but talking 16 years ago, going on 20 years ago. And so obviously I was getting older at the time, and there was a time when I thought about getting back into it. And that charity I did, it was very simple. It was Hacksaw Duggan and me. I was a Russian. And even working with him, it was just, I was 7 years out with the cancer, and I took bumps and stuff, and it hurts. I was not, it's like riding a bicycle, but your body, it does get older. So I guess you could say I officially hung it up in 2006, but that was that, and that's the reason I did quit. It was because of the sickness, and once I'm obviously still talking to you here, was well and ready to go again, I had no desire to get back in there, other than the 2 benefits I did, and those were both help for kids with cancer. So it was close to home, and I wanted to do something to try to give back a little bit. So
you to jump around a bit, Ibsen is asking a question about if you ever saw Haku in action, and I'm thinking that means out of the ring, but you had a high profile match with Haku and Andre the Giant when they were the Colossal Connection on syndicated television for the WWF. What was that experience like, specifically working with Andre, and did you Are you aware of any of the famous Haku tough guy stories firsthand or even second?
At the time, I did. I would take this. I trained with Nelson Royal for 6 months, and then we got sent. He said, "Vince is ready for some new faces," and that meant people like me take them up. And a lot of the Crockett guys were still working, doing jobs up there. So there was 13 or 14 of us, and Gene Ligon was our correspondent. He's the one that Nelson's right hand man, and we went up there, and I had no idea. I was 22 years old, and I just go up there and find out what was going on. And the second night we did 2 tapings a week, Monday, Tuesday. We were in Wheeling, West Virginia, Monday night, and Toledo, Ohio, the second night. First night I wrestled Boss Man and Akeem. Second night, Andre and Haku. So my second ever television match was against probably the greatest attraction in wrestling history. And I to this day it doesn't seem real because I can share a story if you want to hear about that. I may have told you, Marie, but here I am. They had a chalkboard that they put it up in the right there at the monitor, and about 2:00, we had to be there at 1. About 2:30, 3:00 rather, they would write down the matches, and there were three different tapings, and we usually were done about 10:30, 11:00. Had a couple of dark matches, which were the main events mainly, and maybe a couple in the beginning, but usually it was Hogan and Perfect, or whoever, Ultimate Warrior and Rick Rude, but that was always last, and it was never on TV. But he's writing it down, Red Rooster versus Tommy Angel, Demolition versus whoever, and then he got to the third match. It says Andre and Haku versus Paul Roma, and I saw him like CHU. I said, no, it can't be. No, it's a different Chuck. It can't. Chuck Coates. I'm like, wow, I'm going to be in the ring. So immediately I'm, oh gosh, Lord have mercy, help me. And I watch wrestling religiously, so I knew they're finished, but I want to make sure. So Haku comes over. He said, hey, brother, here's what I do and all that. And he said, Andre's playing cards. Do not bother him while he's playing cards. So I'm thinking this is 3 or 4 o'clock. I'm thinking, okay, we'll get with him later, whatever. Well, later was 10 minutes to 7. Guess what? We're third match, and it starts at 7 o'clock, and it's 10 minutes to 7. I had not talked to Andre. And I'm thinking, oh my God, please let me get through this without screwing up. And right there before it started, he come walking up, and I heard him ask, "Where is he? Where is he?" And Haku comes over, grabs him by the shoulder, passed me on the. This is him right here. And Andre said, "I give you a headbutt. Boom! You do not take bump. Do not go down." That's all he said, and that's so he could grab my arms, and then Haku does the kick. Thankfully, like I said, I watched wrestling, and I knew what was going to happen, so it went great. But you talking about scared to death? Andre's playing cards. Don't bother him. He's drinking his wine, and he just didn't. He sat there and he did his thing, and that was Andre. But as far as Haku, I knew he was tough. I never heard the stories, but I did find out later that, my good friend Chris Owens would know this for sure, but I heard that Haku was the only man Andre feared. Have you ever heard that?
No, actually, not at all. No.
And I think, and I could be wrong, but I heard, it's just hearsay, that Andre chose him to be his partner. Number one, his health was declining. He couldn't go singles anymore. He'd come in and do the finish. And number two is Haku was the only man he feared. And if I'm wrong, forgive me, but that's what I've been told by more than 3 or 4 people. And it makes sense because everybody was scared of Haku. And, I saw him last year. No, I saw him earlier this year. And I went up and introduced myself. And he was so nice. And I actually had a picture on my phone. I didn't want to sit there and go, hey, check this picture out. I was ready. I knew I want, because I know you're going to have time to stand there and talk. And I showed him the photo. He said, brother, when was that? I said, 1989. Hey, brother, just so nice. He talked to me about 2 or 3 minutes about it. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome that he's so nice. And then, the fact that he was so cool years later was really neat. And, but I think today he could still probably rip my head off, even if he wanted to, he probably could. They say he used to pick up cars and move them, him and Barbarian. whenever you've heard all stories about that, somebody's parked too close, they couldn't get out. And I heard one night the Steiners and Haku and Barbarian picked up this car and moved it, put it on the sidewalk. I mean, because whatever, man, that's crazy. He's definitely a tough guy. Probably the toughest.
You mentioned another gentleman there in passing, the Ultimate Warrior. You have any stories about him? Because he's a kind of one of these guys, they hear the good, the bad, and whatever.
Well, thank God I never wrestled him. He was clotheslining people, and there's guys having to go to the hospital afterwards because he when he clotheslined, he would hit. He would. Here's the ideal. Steiners could do it perfect. Boom, it looked great. Wham. He would come in, and if you weren't ready, he would hit you right in the face because he was just out of control. And we never really crossed paths. I can't really comment on him. I just know that he was very much to himself, but he wasn't one of those guys you see back there just hanging out talking. You never really saw him much. When I was there, this was 89, 90. During that time, he was, and I think I can remember this. There was the arena. There was always like a banquet room area where you pull in vehicles and all. They had vehicles where Hogan had his own RV. Vince had an RV. It was always another one. It was, probably Savage or Warrior. I mean, they just didn't come around much, and everybody else was kind of doing their thing in the locker room. But I remember that like it was yesterday. They had these RVs coming in, and that was their locker room, and they were the big stars, and that's what I guess they. And with that being said, Hulk spoke to me about the kick, the Haku kick. If you see it on YouTube, and he popped me good, and Hogan came by. He was right in the back. He said, "Hey, brother, how was that kick?" I was like, "It was okay." I'm Hulk Hogan's talking to me. Like he kicked the crap out of you, man. And I'm like, "Well, he did, but adrenaline and all that excitement, I didn't feel it till the next morning." And that was kind of cool. Hulk Hogan comes up and asks me how the kick was. So, and not too bad for a 22-year-old kid just starting out, And so, but Ultimate Warrior, I don't have much. I mean, just what I've heard. I can't really say yay or nay, but I just know he was very reclusive and didn't come around much when I was there.
Speaking of divisive figures in wrestling history, you were in WCW at a time. Correct me if I'm wrong. When Ole Anderson had the book, and just wanted to get your impressions of working with him because some of the guys that I interview, without a doubt, comment on his talent and his skill in that regard, but had some less than friendly encounters with Ole. Wanted to know what your experience was.
I stayed. I knew my job, but I stayed clear. I didn't really have much. Not really an encounter with him at all. He would always go through the. Back, you probably know this. They have what they call now producers. That they're pretty much the messenger.
Agent?
Yeah, they're pretty much the messengers for the guy Ole, and back then maybe who else was in the office? I'm trying to think. Well, like WWF, I remember Bruce Pritchard. Well, now it's Bruce Pritchard, and I think Tom Pritchard had some Johnny Ace, Vince, kind of like it's Vince and then them, and then the producers, and they kind of relayed everything to me back then. I didn't have much encounter with Ole, so he never really. I mean, Jody Hamilton was who I worked for. He got all the enhanced guys, and so that was pretty much who I answered to. Ole was still dealing with all the other guys, the top guys and such. But I believe now, from a personal standpoint, being a wrestling fan, the way they used to do it, he was one of the greatest, because I used to think their arm was coming off. I thought, wow, these people, most of the stuff, and you're talking this late 70s, I thought, man, the Andersons are just ruthless. And that's the way it was back then. You could work that all day, and people would swear up and down that they're the meanest guys in the world. And they continued on to do that when Arn joined, even after Gene. they were excellent as far as what we were playing. What we did back then, it was outstanding. Get a body part and work it the whole match, and that was it. And then sometime work an angle out of it, break his arm or dislocate his shoulder or whatever. And as far as worker, he's one of the best at skills I've ever seen. But as far as the boss, like I said, it was kind of there was a screen in between me and him because of the people in between. Ole gave the orders, kind of trickled down. Mind my business, kept my mouth shut, and did whatever. That was a big part of me being employed with about 3 years there. I stayed out of the way and just did what I was asked. I mean, there's some guys who actually had refused to do jobs, and I'm thinking, are you crazy? And I just they were never asked back before, but it's like, who do you think you are, man? You're paid to come up here and get beat, make these guys shine. And that was during a time when Van Hammer and Alan Iron Eagle and PN News, they asked me, Chuck, will you do it? I said, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. Well, guess what? I had a job for about 3 years because I never said no. I didn't like it. I mean, I probably could have killed Alan Iron Eagle. Joe Gomez, he was a great guy, but he didn't know what he was doing. They were trying to build him as an Indian, and just agree with them, do it, and as long as everything's professional, I never had a problem with it because I knew it was my job to do the job. At the end of the day, unless you're Undertaker or Hogan, we're all jobbers. Everybody's done jobs, and so other than that, or Mil Mascaras, you might get that, but but Ole, back to Ole, it was really no interaction with us at all.
You're talking about doing the job there, and it's just like, I just can't get my head around that two guys that are going into a predetermined match, and then one of them is refusing to lose to the other. I just can't get my head around it. But I'm not in the business. So I just don't get it.
Well, be surprised.
What gets me, we were hired to, and nobody told you to come up here and we're going to give you a push. We all came in there. There was different territories. We had the Mid-Atlantic. Rip Rogers brought the guys in from Indiana, and then there were some guys from Texas, and they would all come in. So there was 12, 15 of us from each group, and we all mixed together. And none of our guys, we all pretty much did what we were asked. But that one guy, I remember that night, he's like, I'm not doing that. I'm like, man, you're crazy. And Rip was talking. Rip said, look, man, they're not going to bring you back. And I forgot it was somebody, might have been State Patrol. It was somebody that he just didn't want to lose to. But I thought, you are literally here because you're going to lose. And he's just a prima donna, and he thought that he was too good for that. So whatever. Good luck to you, buddy. But I stayed clear of all that. I just tell me what to do. I told Jody one time, I said, Jody, this is like after 2 years, you must really like me. He said, why is that, kid? I said, because you never give me Sid or Vader. I said, thank you. And he I thought, I hope I didn't give him an idea. But I got the Steiners 4 times, got Sting. Wow, man, I could go on and on.
Chuck, did you ever locate the tapes of you and Kurt Angle?
I have not found it, and I even asked Kurt about it. He said, somebody's got it. They record everything up there. And let's tell you that. Matter of fact, you can Google the date. I've researched it as far as that, and I've got record of it being on some kind of a website, but still no video. It's probably locked up in the archive. That sometimes dark matches pop up. If you noticed,
yeah, they've started doing that lately. Yeah. Do you want to fill Jack in on the story behind that Kurt Angle dark match? I know we talked about it before, but it's a really cool story.
Yeah, man. Okay, at this time, Mike Howell was alredy in play. He was a contract. He was one of the Dupp brothers, the ECW, the Dupps, and they were going to bring him in. Him and Murray were going to bring him in and kind of do something similar to they did with the Wyatt family. This is way before the Wyatts. And Mike had a little bit of, he was already in there. He was getting a contract. And they put me with, what was his name? Essa Rio?
Essa Rios, yes.
Yeah. And Mike come up to Tony Gurria. He says, Tony, my friend, Chuck here, he's not going to be able to hang. He's not going to be able to, all that Mexican, all that stuff. He said, he's not, because that's not his style. And Mike went up to bat for me. And Tony said, hey, you think you can do a Kurt? And Mike said, that's more like it. He's more of a wrestler. and Mike got it changed. And I was thinking, thank you. That's back when Lita was with him, and he got it changed, and they put a smaller guy with the Rios, and but when he got it changed, this is in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and it was probably 80, 89. I can't remember exactly the month, but so I had Kurt Angle. He's just riding off of his Olympics and all that stuff, and they're trying to build him to see what he's got, and if he can transfer what he knows, his wrestling knowledge, into what we do, and be able to work, and then his mic skills and all that. So they brought him out and got in the ring, and they told us before we got 7 minutes. He said, and do the angle slam, the angle slam was the finish. And like I said, Kurt was brand new and he was still learning, but I knew within 10 seconds I was in there with a Olympic gold medalist, because he didn't even call it. We tied up, and he shot on me and did a fireman's carry, and I was thinking to myself, oh boy, this is going to be a long match. But then we were going to start out working with the arm. I remember this. He ended up with the arm, and he worked it, and the next thing you know, I cut him off. He'd get back on me. Just your normal dark match, and trying to see what kind of reaction you get, and it was going well. Man, I felt like we'd been in there for 20 minutes, and Kurt looks at Nick. I can't remember the referee. Might have been Hebner. And says, that's been about 7 minutes. He said, I have got no cue yet. No cue. And we were both thinking, so he said, well, get some heat. He shot me in the corner, and he come charging, and I kicked him in the face, whatever, and I slammed, whatever. That's why I want to get it, because I can't remember what all I did, but I got some heat, and okay, it's time. We went home, and great finish. Everything went great. And got back, and Kurt and Jim Ross, of all people, Jim Ross says, you guys handled that well. Good job. And Kurt's like, how long did we go? He said, you went 12 minutes. And Kurt says, I thought we had 7. He said, well, I wanted to see how you would handle it. It's live television when we're on a live segment, and we need to add time to the show. So that's why they did it without telling him. They wanted to see how he would react. It was just all part of his training and testing him and seeing. And Jim Ross said it was perfect. And the one regret I have that day is I said thank you and let Jim Ross walk off. And Mabel come up to me, which is a good friend. King Mabel we were the same independent group, Viscera. He says, Chuck, you just had an opportunity to tell him this is what you want to do. This is your chance. And you let it go. And so I said, well, I'm going to go find him. Well, it was 2 months later, Jim Ross was gone. That's my biggest regret in my 20-year career. When Jim Ross comes to me, I didn't go to him and says, you guys handled it great. He said, that's when you say, can I get a second with you? And you go over there and tell him, this is all I want to do. If there's any way I can just get a job, this is what and just please pour it out. Nobody gets that opportunity very often. And you had him one-on-one, you and Kurt and Jim, nobody else was around. You could have told him. I just like, thank you so much. But I was still fairly green, and I was just learning. And I said 89, 1999. I'm sorry, because Kurt didn't Olympic gold medal until 6. So I shouldn't say I was green. I was just ignorant, because I'd been wrestling 12 years. But that's my biggest regret, and that just and it may have not went nowhere. It may have just led to nothing. But at least he would have known. Hey, in my mind, Chuck said, maybe I could have been Ludwig Borga or somebody. I don't know. I'm just joking. But yeah, that was it. But Kurt, we had a great match, and like I said, it's out there somewhere, and hopefully one day it'll pop up on YouTube. And like I said, I personally asked Kurt. Kurt said it's out there because they keep everything. So we'll see one day.
Here's a good question that is an interesting one from Ibzan again. He's asking, how different was a TV taping back in the day in the WWF compared to WCW? Notwithstanding the during the 90s, that was a budgetary crunch in WCW. But any differences with the agents or the organization, etc.?
Yes, they seem. It seemed to me that they would, if it's a screw up, if it wasn't terrible, they would use it anyway. WWF didn't tolerate it. I messed up with Nikolai Volkov one night, and he asked me, he said, you leapfrog It's Bolsheviks against me, and I'm leapfrogging him. He's in the middle of the ring. Well, he's a big man, you know. I went to do the leapfrog. I was gonna come on. He's gonna do that little spin kick he used to do. Well, I come over Nikolai, and I don't get over him, and I go into the ropes head first. Trip, fall. He picks me up and said, "It's okay. Let's do the spin kick." But they edited it. They were like, "Get that crap out." So all you saw was him off. They changed the angle, and he did the spin kick. But that night, I fell into the ropes. WWF or WCW, I don't remember them editing as much. Maybe it's time consuming or whatever. Now, something that bad, they probably would have. But there's been times when there was a slight mess up, that's what came to mind when you asked that question. WWF was probably a little bit more strict about making the product, you know, look precise, and that's the good thing about taping. You can edit that stuff out. And but Nikolai, we did the same exact thing again because he knew it was going to be edited. So, and WCW probably wouldn't have done that. They may have done that, but you know, other than that, the agents about the same. No, not much difference. I'd say probably, if any difference at all, I'd say that I had Tony Gurria, Sergeant Jacques Goulet, Chief Jay Strongbow. I believe that's the main three in that 89, 90. And they were a little bit more, I don't know, not that they didn't trust you, but it's more like, now listen, you need to get out there and make sure you do it right. You need to go. I mean, Tony Gurria was a stickler as far as, I'm thinking, I probably wouldn't be here if I couldn't do it, because they wouldn't even send me. Nelson Royal's not going to send. I'm not saying I'm the best, but he's not going to send somebody up there. That's why Vince hired him to do that, because he knew that he would kind of weed out the bad ones. And so I was able to. But Gurria used to seem to be a little bit more, and then he'd let you know afterwards. You know, that was good. That was okay. You could work on this. WCW never really, and maybe it's because I worked with them a lot longer, and I became almost a common, you know, name weekly, kind of like George South, you know, or people very hard or whatever. But after so many months, people were like, "Oh, that's Chuck. You can work with him." He you know, I don't know how true this is. I guess I should ask him, but I was told Sting used to ask for me, and Jody said, "I can't give them to you every week. It's gonna be the same. You know, they're gonna like this every week. No, Chuck Coates and Sting again." So that was an honor. If that's true, that was an honor to be able to say that he actually wanted me to work with him. He had him 3 times, 1 time. So him and Lex, and then 3 different single matches with Big. So that was kind of neat. And so that's pretty much it. There wasn't a lot of difference, but I think WWF was a little bit more of a stick on first. Thankfully, I didn't have a lot of screw ups. That was the biggest one, and the rest of them it wasn't even, you couldn't even tell maybe we did an elbow instead of a hip toss or whatever. But it was already, in wrestling, you get to the point where if you miss a spot, you can cover it up pretty good. So there wasn't a lot of those, but I'm sure that happened over once, throughout the year.
So you hang around a lot of these conventions, and you get to meet a lot of people from the past, a lot of wrestlers in the same room, and then like you have crazy wrestling fans. What is the funniest or craziest story you have from the convention world?
Oh man, let me think. Been doing these about 5 years. The guys that come up in the what's the word? Is it cosplay? Cosplay, yeah. Those guys are great because they'll come up and actually do a little skit. They do skits in front of the rest of the stuff. Of course, when they do that's great. Macho and Dusty, Sheik, they come up and they actually use themselves Sheik voice and
we seem to be losing a good bit of audio on you, Chuck, aren't we, Jack? There.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason.
Is it better now?
Better now, yeah.
I got 100% now. I'm gonna take the charger off. How about that? Is that better?
That's better.
Beautiful. Maybe it was blocking. They'll come up and do the the whole skit like they're the real person, you know. And this past week, Dusty, Sheik, Macho, there's 2 or 3 Macho men that they'll come up and they'll say, you know, can I get a picture? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. You know, actually, you know, Ron Simmons gets a kick out of that, and some people not so much. You know, Jerry Lawler was like, oh my God, what's going on here? And those are fun. And the other one that sticks out, the giant, huge robot, the guys that are like 8, 12, 14 foot tall. And I don't know what they do, but they come up in those outfits, and it's crazy because it looks like some of them are so good. It looks like a real character out of a movie. I mean, it's like, wow. Man. One of the coolest things was 95% of the time the rest are wanting. And,
We've lost you again.
oh no. How about now?
Yeah, we're good again.
That's good.
Man, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, 95% of the time the wrestlers are wanting to meet the actors. And I had Bret Hart last year in Raleigh. Actually, it was last year. And Richard Dreyfuss wanted to meet Bret Hart. That was cool. One of the guys come over and says, if Bret gets a minute, Richard Dreyfuss wants to meet him. And I saw Bret. Did you hear that? He goes, let's go. He stopped right then. He had like 20 people waiting. And he's like, I'll be right back. We took off over there. And so that was neat. And Bret walks up. He goes, hey, Bret Hart, big fan. And I thought that was so cool. Then he was a star. He was in Jaws and everything. But that was the one time I remembered that the wrestler was the actor was a fan of the wrestler. So, but like I was with Kane, and we were next to who was in Christmas Vacation?
Chevy Chase?
Not Chevy Chase, Cousin Eddie.
Yeah.
Randy.
Yeah, Randy Quaid.
Randy Quaid, and he didn't know Kane, but Kane knew him, and so then Kane found out he was a big conservative. So I thought I was going to say, Kane, we got to get back to our table. We got like 25 people, but they got talking about politics. I'm thinking, Lord have mercy. And so that was something else, but you know, that was neat. And other than that, you got people bring gifts. I mean, and very rarely do the wrestlers take them. And I try to, if we're going to see them again, I may take them for them. If they're flying, they won't take it. And but there's sometimes where it's something they, you know, I mean, I've seen all kinds of stuff. People are very passionate about meeting these. That's their hero, and they'll make them tumblers. They make them. The girls they draw pictures for them. Somebody brought Kurt Angle half a gallon of milk. I guess they thought he was going to drink it. He said he signed the carton and gave it back to him. So that was kind of cool. But he wanted Kurt to have it. I think he thought he was going to actually chug it right then. But other than that, you know, there's not been really any anything really crazy, I guess, since I've been doing it. I can remember.
Yes.
Well, shout out to Mike Ramondi, who we've interviewed on this program. He's the Dusty cosplayer, great guy and very passionate about what he does. I wanted to ask you though, a match that is on YouTube of yours where you worked on WCW television, El Gigante, George Gonzalez, Giant Gonzalez. How the heck did you get a match out of him? That must have been daunting for a guy who was fairly new in the business.
Cuban Assassin was his interpreter. He spoke no English. And I told him every time he'd do the claw, I mean, it was, what was it? 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Every time he did the claw, the only thing I asked Cuban Assassin, I said, he comes in, does the claw, and takes him down, and that's it. I said, I'd like to come off the ropes. And he said, okay. And he told him, spoke to him, to come off the ropes and catch me like my feet fly out. You may have saw the match. Mm-hmm. And it worked out great, except when he came down, he busted wham. My nose started bleeding and stuff. It's all right though, but we just made it look a little different. You know, everybody, rather than just your claw, but he was open for it. He was open to it. I thought he would say no. He did it. It went off good. I just had to catch that big hand to make sure I didn't lose it. because but it was I guess I've got one more, the Big Show, and I can do the trifecta, right? John, I like in Big Show. I guess you got the one now that's I can't think of his name. The guy from Nigeria. He's like 7.
Amos, isn't his name? Amos.
Yeah.
Steve Kern found him in a restaurant. He told me.
Oh wow. Well, it was good. It went well the best it could. It was not any whatsoever. It was basically a squash match, and there was no,
catch can.
Yeah, I just kind of fell into it. I was there, and they put me with him, and like I said, it was over before I even realized I was in the ring.
Wanted to, and you've been very generous with your time. We've pretty much burned through the hour, but I wanted to ask you a question regarding the business moving away from enhancement talents and kind of changing the entire TV model where we don't do those enhancement matches anymore. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing for the business? And what about recognition for yourself, some of the people that you've talked about, the Barry Horowitz, Tommy Angel, George South, Reno Riggins, the list goes on and on. All the guys that we remember that really made a strong contribution to the product back in the day in the Hall of Fame.
I've said this for the past few years. I don't think that WWE, and I may be being biased, but I don't think they would go wrong by doing that. I think people have a respect I mean, I've had more. I joined the WCW group 2 weeks ago, and I've had more people pouring out kind. I mean, I've had nobody be rude, and I mean, yeah, call me a jobber. I don't care. I mean, I like saying enhancement talent, but hey, it is what it is. We are who we are. But overall, it's been a pouring out. I've got people sending me cards. Card number 3 in the WCW is me and Sting, and I've got a card I've got to send back to a fella that wants it, and autograph pictures, and I just give them to them. I don't want to make any money. I just appreciate they recognize and appreciate me. But I do think they should probably go that route, and maybe I really think it'd be a hit, and because like you said, and even the stars will tell you, it started back with the job matches made them who they are, and back then it was a different. Today, I don't think it would work unless you had James Ellsworth that started out, but I mean, unless it's a special gimmick type thing. But as far as people, they already get. Our job was to build them up, so people would spend money to go watch them live. TV like an advertisement. Nowadays, they get everything on TV. So really, the pay-per-views are like the ultimate matches. The TV sets up the angles, but we have what I did has no purpose anymore. And I don't think it would. People would pay attention to it because it's different. And plus, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and nobody knows it's a work. And they halfway believed it when I was there, and somewhat, at the time in the 70s when I started, everybody pretty much, it was like heartbroken when they found out Nikita wasn't Russian, and but nowadays it wouldn't work. You can't market it because they already get everything. You already get everything you have. Our job was to build up the wrestler so people would want to go buy a ticket to go watch. Then the pay-per-view came along, and then it's like you can see it coming from a mile away. And so, but I do believe, I agree, in the history of wrestling, we should have a part, and they had some kind of I'm not saying me personally, but people that really were good and never got that break. We all got that break while we did it, but it wasn't meant to be. But I've seen Barry Horowitz was excellent. Some of the guys, I don't know if you remember a guy named Brady Boone. He was outstanding. Brady Boone was outstanding and had the body physique. He just didn't, Mark Mero, I was there the night he got his break. They made him Johnny B. Bad. He was in the right place. Loved him. And he was with me. He was doing jobs and doing, but Dusty loved him and said, "We're going to do something with you, baby." And that was it. It's just right place, right time, but I do believe there should be something, some acknowledgement there overall, because it really, it's like Hogan and Flair and all the huge Rock, Stone Cold, Undertaker, they've brought us to where we are with the stars, where there was guys back in the day who got you where you were in the first place. So, and I believe they would probably agree with that. Even Ric Flair has said George South's one of the best guys. You know, some of those top guys, George would bump for anybody, you know. But that would be to have a little something, you know, set aside and maybe acknowledge the guys that did that. But we'll see. Maybe it'll come. Maybe I'll get an action figure after all. Who knows?
Absolutely. And I think there's an argument to be made that, you know, it's no coincidence that stars per se are fewer and farther between now, as opposed to back in the day when the carpenters like yourself weren't there to build them up.
Yeah. It's lost art. We I don't know. Sometimes when Mulkeys beat Gladiators, that was big. People loved it. You know, they sold out the Anderson Coliseum. They built up the Midnights and the Mulkeys, and they sold out. And that was their hometown. Mulkey Mania, baby. But see, that's because the power of television and the power of Jimmy Cornette, the people who made it, who talked the talk and got people fired up. That was a different time. But, man, that was so much fun. Just thinking 1, 2, 3 Kid beating Razor Ramon. That was neat. I like that stuff. People are like, man, maybe this stuff, you know, it's the same old every week, same old thing, you know. And then you see something like that, you're like, wow, that was awesome, you know. But sadly, those days are gone, and it's moved on to this, what we have today, and great athletes, but no psychology. They just don't teach it anymore because it kind of went out with kayfabe, I guess.
It's just a TV show now, really. It's a completely different product altogether, and we always reminisce, and then we sound like old bitter men here, don't we, Jack?
Like
Well, I am. You're not.
But look at country music now. You can't tell country music from pop. You know, everything's changed, and it's just the way it is. We tend to go with the flow, and if you're making money, people go with it.
Yeah, I see, like, because country music's obviously huge in the States, and now I see, Beyonce is a country singer, or everyone's a country singer now, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on over there?
Point made, exactly. If they can make money doing it, people will cross the lines. That's why nobody retires anymore. Kiss says they're retired, they'll be back. Too much money, man.
Mike Tyson tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night, brother. I mean, you know, if they're going to pay me, I don't know how much he's making, but doggone right, I'll go out there and take a power bomb in a heartbeat.
Well, Chuck, where
Jack, do you think Mike Tyson might have to do a job tomorrow night?
I hope it's not a work. I really hope it's not.
Oh,
but
me too.
I'm thinking maybe they're going to go over because Tyson's has been not disrespectful, but he's already been there, done that. And if they're going to run an angle off of this for a rematch, he'll definitely lose.
Watch out for the I'm not sure where it is on the match card, but one of our greatest athletes in this small country, Katie Taylor, 3-time world champion. She's having
I
think she's having her last fight tomorrow. As far
Okay.
as I know, that's her last bow out. So
I'll tell you, I know we got to go, but tough gun from Ireland was Fit Finlay. What a stud. I wouldn't want to fight him for nothing. I never wrestled him, but I met him, and I'm like, that's a man right there. Just by his handshake alone, you know.
Yeah, the I love to fight thing was a shoot, right?
Man, I'm telling you, thank God. He was like Ronnie Garvin times 2.
Where can the fans find you, Chuck, on social media? And do you have any upcoming appearances or whatnot that the fans should know about?
I'm the WrestleCade. It's pretty big over here. It's Thanksgiving Saturday after Thanksgiving. It's huge. It's in Winston-Salem. Tracy Myers and those guys do a great job, and we'll be there. I'll be helping out Kane that day, is what I was told. We got like 10 talents. It's huge. It's one of the biggest ones of the year. So Winston-Salem on the 30th, I believe, in November. And then next year, I don't have anything the rest of the year, although I do have some speaking engagements with the job I do now is I work for a homeless shelter. That's a nonprofit, and I'd go out and speak. And I shoot wrestling, my testimony, then I also get a chance to tell them about what we do and, help people that are in need. And face it, man, people are struggling. And so it goes beyond wrestling, you know, and the wrestling kind of draws them in. And then once they realize, oh man, and you hear the stories, and then you can kind of say, look, you know, if you need a hand, we're here. And that's what I do now, you know, try to help people that can't help themselves.
That's awesome. Well, Chuck, I want to thank you for your time tonight. Always entertaining stuff, and wish you well at that big WrestleCade and beyond.
Thank you, and let's do it again sometime. I love talking. I talk all day about wrestling.
Absolutely. Well, that's it, fans, for a live edition of the Cheap Heat Productions Pro Wrestling Podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe and like this video, and you'll stay on top of all the great content coming once Morris can take some time away from his civic duty, and again, being a man of the people, doing what he has to do to serve his constituency. We'll be back with more interviews, but until then, take care, everybody.
Thank you very much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel if at all possible. It would really help me out. And don't forget, you can check out my back catalog of videos